The wider the base, the higher the peak. This is a phrase popularized by Louis Simmons and later expounded upon by one of, I believe, a guy who was one of his former pupils, Brandon Lilly, and his 365 strong concept, which was based entirely around the idea of quote unquote everyday strength. So really the base portion of this particular equation. And it's the same with Louis' phrase. Really, ultimately, your peak is contingent upon your base. Therefore, the base is really the absolute most important part of this formula. But basically, you've got these really big, uber strong guys all kind of shouting the same message at you. And I find that there is confusion amongst the newer lifters about what the hell it actually even means. I was having a conversation with one of my clients recently about this same concept, as he's planning to do a powerlifting competition soon. So naturally, the idea of peaking came up. But it has also been something that he and I have talked about previously, as high frequency squatting is something that he has dabbled with in the past before he came to me for coaching, and he saw good results with it. So it is a concept that he's interested in, and for good reason. They were really good results that he managed to get. He crushed a 405-pound squat after just a few weeks of Smoloff Jr., coupled with, I believe he told me it was 2 weeks of high frequency squat work up to heavy singles immediately following the Smoloff Jr. protocol. And during that time period, he gained something like 40 or 50 pounds on his squat 1 rep max. So it was basically like 50 pounds in a month. And honestly, that's not all that uncommon or crazy of a thing to have happen. I have done that myself multiple times, on multiple occasions, just in myself, and I have seen it in many others as well when using these same protocols over the years. But then my client, he stopped the high frequency work, as you have to do at some point because it's basically unsustainable. And a few short weeks later, his squat had dropped right back down to where it was before he started the Smoloff Jr. program. Now, I first saw this happen. The very first time I saw it many years ago, it was when I was first getting started with strength programming. And I wasn't doing it professionally or anything like that. I was just a guy who lifted. And a friend of mine ran Smoloff, the whole program, for his squat. And he went from, it must have been like a 230 pound or maybe 240 pound max, something like that, up to a 315 pound single at the end of the Smoloff program. I can still see him in my head hitting that 3-plate squat that I honestly didn't think he would be able to hit. So it was crazy fucking gains, man, really. And then the dude went back to normal squat training after that, just once or twice a week or whatever. Something that was more sustainable, right? Tamer levels of volume, tamer levels of intensity. And he couldn't squat. It was maybe like 250. I think I watched him miss a 250 pound single literally 2 weeks later. And I'm not exaggerating or making this up. Honestly, it's pretty maddening, actually. So now these are examples of really high peaks, right? These guys had a baseline level that they had started at, whatever it was, and then they implemented what is essentially a highly specific, extreme, and unsustainable training method to reach a PR goal weight that they wanted to lift for whatever reason. And that can be whatever reason you want it to be, man. It can be whatever it is for you. It doesn't have to be anything special or anything specific. It can just be whatever floats your boat, right? But then, after returning back to Earth, as we're all forced to do eventually, and being forced to perform more sustainable training, once again, the peak dissipates, and then their strength, it dips back down. Essentially, it goes back to normal. So this is what frequency does. This is what peaking does, or what it can do when executed well. And these methods are fun to tinker with and pontificate on, and fun to use to win competitions or hit lifetime goal numbers. But the fact of the matter is that they aren't really methods of training. They are just methods of maximizing specific skill. These guys didn't actually get stronger. They didn't actually build muscle or enhance their ability to produce force. They simply became really, really good at learning how to optimally display the force that they could already produce in a specific movement pattern. But they did not get stronger, because if they did, then they would have retained most of those gains, because true strength is an enduring quality. It can last for months and years with little maintenance once it's built, because the neural and structural changes required by the body to build it are so intensive that once they're completed, the body does not want to revert back, because the organism must literally evolve on an individual level in order for these changes to occur in the first place. So the peak is really an illusion, right? It's a transient state. It's fleeting. That's not to say that achieving it is easy by any stretch of the imagination, because in reality, it can be some of the hardest work you'll ever do. But if you're doing it, you better damn well know why you're doing it. You aren't doing it to create gains. You're doing it to create a temporary state of maximal performance, hopefully for a specific reason. So now, this leads us to the base. The base, on the other hand, is what can you do today? And what can you do tomorrow? And what can you do the day after that? And 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, forever and ever and ever, right? And I'm sure you get the point, but it is what are you capable of all the time? What are you capable of at a moment's notice? What are you capable of when you didn't sleep all that great? What are you capable of when you're going through it with your spouse, or when work is stressful, or when your dog just died, or when the sun and the moon and the stars just aren't quite lining up right, and everything in your life is shitty and nothing is going quite right? What are you capable of then? That is your base. It's the everyday. It is the floor that your body considers acceptable to lie on when everything is going just kind of so-so, or maybe even when everything is going kind of shitty. But it's definitely not your peak state. It's not your ceiling. In my opinion, the base is actually the most important thing of all. The peak is nice, the peak is fun, the peak is cool, but it's really just the cherry on top. The base is the sundae, man. The base is the steak and the potatoes and the veggies, and it's the whole goddamn meal. It is everything. And the peak is an afterthought, because the entire utility and value of the peak is contingent wholly upon the base. The higher you push the floor, then by necessity, the higher the ceiling has to be. If you can make your base what your peak used to be, then your peak will be even higher. And the more well-rounded that you can make yourself in this process, the more different types of things you can become strong at, the higher and higher you can keep stacking on top of it. The wider the base, the higher the peak. It's literally a pyramid. If you're good at everything, you will be bad at nothing, right? That sounds so simple as to almost be meaningless, but when you think about it from this perspective of the base, you realize it actually means everything. If you're only good at low bar squats with a straight bar, then that is all you're good at. But if you are good at squatting with any implement, to any depth, with any bar positioning, etc., 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 then you're just a good squatter, and you are a good low bar squatter by default. The real difference here is that peak training, by its nature, is unsustainable. It will lead to burnout and stagnation and inevitably injury if you push it too hard or too far or for too long. It also acclimates your body to a higher workload as its maintenance point, the minimum amount of work required to maintain the gains that you have. That is not what you want, because then you simply can't make progress anymore. You want your maintenance point to be the lowest amount of work possible. You want to be able to do the least amount of work you can do while still having your body retain all of its gains. That way, when you really want to make good progress, all you have to do is increase the workload slightly. And since base training is more moderate by nature, that's an easy place to pick up from and improve upon. This also makes it much more sustainable in general, and as a result, the gains acquired this way are much truer and more stable as well. You can take time off, you can slack off, you can cut your workload way the fuck down, and your gains will not go anywhere if you have a strong and solid base. So focus on the base first and foremost. Be smart about your training and approach it with a long-term perspective in mind. Keep training hard, guys. Too easy, baby.